My name's Rashid. Some of you guys I knew, some of you guys I think meet for the first time. I'm also part of the same Charlotte News Group, Israel. Jeremy hopefully will be showing a little bit later, and William. Today I'm gonna, we talk a lot about Tableau and building stuff in Tableau, and this is actually pretty good because what Israel just showed you, what I'm going to show you, and I think the key takeaway is I don't think there's a universal approach when it comes to designing dashboards. Israel just showed you literally perfect example and scenario of how they use tile dashboards and verticals and horizontals. I'm a fixed guy. I'm going to do polar opposite. This is not necessarily to teach you what to do. This is just going to be an example of how I do. And you really kind of got to find your own way when it comes to design. So I'm going to show you, we don't do this very often. I think we should. From zero to dashboard. I'm going to start with this, and hopefully I'm going to keep you guys here for 15 minutes, nothing more. We're going to finish dashboard when it's all said and done. So let me bring you up to speed. About 2 weeks ago, William came to me and he said, next month we're doing our Tableau event in conjunction with Snowflake. And Snowflake's a cloud-based database, kind of like, they're cloud, like AWS. So they also do, type of SQL type of database, but it's in the cloud. And they were nice enough to let us use some of their sample data, their actual database. So 2 weeks ago, I looked at Snowflake sample data for the first time. I had no idea what this stuff is. This is exactly what you're going to deal with in your regular business environment. Someone's going to hand you some data and say, go build me a dashboard. You're like, okay. So just like it happened in the real world, I looked at this data and I said, all right, I got a few things here I think I could work with when it would come to building a valuable dashboard. I got some customer information, I got some nation information, I got some order information, I got regional information. So I looked at it and I said, all right, I can build you a quarter-over-quarter comparison of orders by region. We're going to do this right now. So the first thing I want to do, if I'm going to do a quarter-over-quarter comparison, what I really want to do is build a parameter first, because I know for a fact I want to have the dashboard be able to look at more than one quarter at a time. So I'm going to go to my order date and I'm going to literally say create parameter. And what I'm doing is basically I'm going to call this select quarter. This is what my user is ultimately going to use to define what they're looking at. So since I know it's going to be a quarterly type of view, I'm going to change this to range. I'm going to say, step by 1 quarter, and I'm going to change the display format to be, year quarter. But I don't really like the way that looks, so I'm going to do the other way around. I'm going to say quarter year. And stop me if you have any questions about what I'm doing. But hopefully, this will all kind of make sense when we're all said and done. So now I've got a nice parameter, which will allow my user to basically select a quarter in, time. So let's take a look at it. And it looks pretty good. So this is what I want. I want my user to be able to see something like this, and they can kind of drill through each quarter, at a time to be able to kind of do what they want to do. Now, the real trick here is I'm going to have to create a calculated field which focuses on just orders in what I'm going to call the current period. To make this simple, I've already created a calculated field which is just basically the number of orders. It's just a count distinct of the order key, which is like saying it's a count distinct of the order ID. How many orders were there in a given time frame? I don't want to recount them. I don't want someone who had an order that shipped on Monday and the other part on Friday. I don't want to count that. That's just one of them. I just want to count one order, one time within my reference. So I've got that to work with. Now the trick here is what I got to do is create a calculated field that looks at that same kind of count, but it does it for just the quarter in question. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use the date truncate field. And I'm going to show you why. I'm going to say I want to truncate on just quarter. And the first thing I want to do is with my parameter,
close your quarter.
Okay, so now I've got my date truncated. And what this would do, this would just focus on the quarter of whatever someone selected in the parameter. So I want to take that and I want to say that's got to equal the date truncate of the same thing, which would also be the quarter. But this time I'm going to use the actual field itself, the order date. And now by doing this, I've created a true false, which is basically saying that the quarter of the parameter that the user selects has to match the quarter of the actual order date. So now that I've got that, now I've got to kind of put this in something larger. And this is how I write code most of the time. I start in the middle and I work my way outside. So I've got this working the way that I want. I'm going to put an if statement around this. I'm going to say if this entire thing is true, then basically just give me the order key. And I'll just say end. And now I'm going to take this entire thing and wrap this in a count distinct. To say take all of this and just count distinct the whole damn thing. Now, if I did this correctly, and we'll test it, I'm going to call this the number of current orders. And you should always test yourself when you write these kind of calculations because you want to make sure you did it right. Easiest way to do this, let's take order date, let's put it out here. I'm going to say, I'll expand on order in here. And now basically what I'm going to do, I'm going to take measure names, put it in columns. I'm going to take measure values, put it on text. I'm going to get rid of some of the stuff that I don't want. Basically these three things here. And if we look, I've got the number of orders, which is the real field, which is showing me all of the orders for every quarter. And then I've got my new field, which is only showing orders for Q2 of 1992. This works. As I move in time, it's moving too. This is kind of the effect. And the reason I'm doing this is because, notice, there's really nothing in filter shelf. I mean, right now, measure names in the filter shelf, but that's only because of basically, for me just showing you that it worked. If I take everything off, and kind of take everything off, get back to scratch, there really was nothing in the filter shelf, meaning that the number of current orders fields calculates the right number without any filter. And that's what I want. Because now I've got my number of current orders, I'm going to duplicate this field, and we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to now create previous orders. Trust me, this whole thing will come full circle in a minute.
Because you want quarter over quarter.
Now this is where it's going to get weird. The whole thing works perfectly, there's just one piece I have to replace, and it's this piece right here. This is the piece where instead of putting the order date here, what I need to do is a date add function. I'm going to say add 1 quarter right here to the order date. And again, like I said, always test yourself after the fact.
Need a comma.
Yeah, thanks.
You're gonna go -1 instead of +1?
Yeah, I know. You'll see. Because that threw me off the first time too, and I had to test this thing 3 times. All right. Okay. Now, why is that a +1 and not a -1? What this is doing, it's saying select, the quarter of the user parameter, what the user you were selecting. And that has to equal the quarter on the right side, which I just added a quarter to. Because that doesn't equal, what does equal is the actual month before. And it's hard to explain, but again, it's one of those things, if you look at it, it'll make sense. It'll basically work the way it's supposed to. But let's
You could have done the date on the parameter, which would have been probably more intuitive to say, this is the quarter, go a quarter before, and that would have been a -1.
And you're right, I think that would have worked just as well, just as easily. But to your point, if this works correctly, same thing as before, now as I'm moving my parameter, you'll see that my current one is what it's supposed to be, and now the previous one is populated. So the good news is, both of these are working the way that they're supposed to. So why did I do this in the first place? Well, let me show you. The whole point of all this is to build my actual dashboard, the thing I wanted to build all along, and that's that comparison by region. So let me just get rid of stuff right now. Getting rid of stuff. All right, so let's build a real dashboard right now. Let's build, this is gonna be a 3-parter if I can get it in time, but let's just do this one at a time, and we'll see how far we get. So I'm gonna bring out region, I'm gonna bring out nation, if I can find it, and I'm gonna bring out the number of current orders. So now, I got my nice little bar chart which is showing me the number of orders for each combination of region and nation. Now I'm going to take previous orders, that field I just created, and drop it on detail. And by dropping it on detail, I can now use it in the view. I'm going to create a reference line. I'm going to use this reference line per cell. I'm going to say number of previous orders. I'm going to say sum. I'm going to say I don't want no tooltip, no computation. We'll make this a nice black line so it stands out. Now, I've got a nice comparison that shows me clearly, the previous versus the current. And I take this a step further. This is good, but we can make it better. How do we make it better? Let's say, I gotta get some notes here to keep myself All right, let's say if the number of current orders is greater than the number of previous orders, then we'll call that an outperformer. And then I'll say else underperformer. And we will call this order color. All right, I know it's misspelled. Who cares? All right, I'm going to drop that on color. Now I'm going to start making things pretty. You see what I'm saying? I'm going to take this down to about 70%, and I'm going to add a border. And I do this a lot because it's a little bit easier on the eyes. Now,
Excellent.
you really got something that stands out, clear as mud. You know, who's doing good, who's not doing good, quarter over quarter is just part one. You know, wait till you see part two. All right, so we've got our first one, and that's going to be order performance. You know, and this is, like I said, this is how I design it. It's not an exact science. You know, you really kind of just you get a feel for it. You kind of keep moving, and you know, it'll start to slowly come together. I'd say over time. The good news is I like this view here, but the first question I would have is that, you know, when the line and the bar are really close, like Kenya and Africa, how much of a difference is that? Somebody's going to ask me, like a percentage-based difference. So let's cover that. I'm going to create another calculated field. And this time I'm going to do something that's basically just a percent difference, and I'm just going to say, what am I going to say? Yeah, I'm going to say, the number of current orders, yeah. Number of current orders minus the number of previous orders. We'll put this,
That entire thing.
yeah, rapid, and then we will divide that by the number of previous orders. And this will just give me a percentage difference. This is all I'm looking for. I just want to see the percent difference between these two fields. So now that I've got that, same thing, I'm going to build the same view again, but this time, you know, I'm going to use my new field. I'm going to say region name, I'm going to say nation name, and I'm going to now put my percent difference thing out there. Now, I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I've got a nice order color. I'm going to drop that on color. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my percent difference. I'm going to put a label on it. I'm going to format this so it's a percentage. You know, make this look nice and pretty. And I'm probably going to have to format my access while I'm at it too. So now I've got a nice kind of clear, and the same thing as before. I'd like to try to, you know, Israel wasn't joking, uniformity. You do it one place, do it every place, you know, because that way it'll keep that same kind of look and feel, you know. So we've now got part two. This is going to be order, not percent difference or something. Okay, so now I've got two parts of my three-part dashboard. It's looking good. It's kind of creating the effect that I wanted to create. And now let's go with the last one. And the last one is really going to be kind of, I'm not going to say the most important one, but this is good. But to make this really good, I need something, you know, I hate to say this, I need guardrails. I need a threshold. I need something that says, even though a lot of these bars are orange, it may not be that big of a deal. That could be normal. You see what I'm saying? I need to somehow show clearly what they should be looking at, not just the obvious, but the thing that is much more kind of not normal, meaning that, you know, it's a percentage difference and it's greater than what I see as a normal percentage difference. So to do this, the first thing I'm going to do is bring back that whole concept of the percent difference in general. Let me kind of show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to just do this real quick. It's just like a visual aid. I'm going to say region name, nation name. Keep that same flow going. And I'm going to bring out number of orders, put it on text. This is all of the orders, literally for all of the regions and nations across the quarters and the years. Percent difference. I'm going to right click right here, quick table calculation, do a percent difference. This is literally what I've actually created over here. It's just one quarter at a time. This is what I want. This is what I want to tell. I'm going to tell it via spark lines. But to do this, easiest way to do this, let Tableau do the work for you. I don't need to recreate the calculation that Tableau did right here. I'm going to take this field. All I did, remember, was right click on it and then say quick table calculation, percent difference. Is all I did. I did that. I'm going to take this field and just drag it into measures. And it's going to create a calculated field now. I'm going to call this calc1 or something, just so I can keep track of it. The reason I'm doing that is the calculation I need is in there. I don't need to write that. I'm not trying to write that. It took a long time for me to understand what that even did. It works the way I want it. I'm going to use it as is, and if that's what's going to help me kind of build out what I want to do with the spark line. So now that I've got the field that I want and kind of, you know, in the manner that I want it, now I can kind of build a percent, you know, I can kind of build a calculation to use it basically the way I want to use it. So what I want to do now is basically I'm going to get rid of these guys right here. I'm going to get rid of this. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create, like I said, think of it like thresholds. I'm going to call this field significant change. And that's what it's going to indicate, whether there basically was a significant change in that period of time. How am I supposed to get it? Guys, I'm slipping, sorry. All right, and I can't spell. All right, so I've got my Calc 1 field, and that's really the main thing. So I'm going to say if Calc 1, that whole thing Tableau did for me, if that field is greater than, let's say 8%. So because I'm saying 8%, I'm going to round to one decimal place. I'm going to say if it's greater than 0.0795. And the 9795 is because I'm going to round, and I can round, I can use the function and all that. I just kind of impatient, I just want to knock it out of you. So I know that something that showed up as 7.95 or 96% would round up to 8%, and I want that to show as a red flag. So I'm taking everything over 7.95 and saying that I want you to use that as far as the test is concerned. So I'm going to say if it's greater than that, or if it's less than that negative, then we're going to call this significant. Otherwise, we'll call it normal. And now that I have this field, I think I got something I can work with. All right, so now the main thing is that I want to build some spark lines. So to build a spark line, I think the best thing for me to do is to use those fields that I just created, that Calc 1 field. I'm going to take Calc 1 and, I'm sorry, actually, I have no date reference. Let me get my order date out there. Put that out there. I'm going to turn that into a month, quarter, and now I'm going to take Calc 1 and put it right here. So now I've got a spark line. I'm going to duplicate this spark line, and I'm going to do a dual access chart. Because what I want is to be able to create, I want to create spark lines. So I want to be able to have the lines, but I also want to have the circles. I want to have dots that show me that significant change. So basically, all I did was just a regular dual axis. It's just a line chart. There's just two line charts on top of each other right now. But what I'm going to do with this middle one, I'm going to call it line. This bottom one, I'm going to change this to circle. So now I've got myself a circle and a line. I'm going to go back to my line one. I'm going to make the size as small as it can be. I'm going to go back to the circle one, and I'm going to make these circles a little bit smaller. Okay, something like that. So now we've got something that actually looks and feels kind of like a spark line. Now, I want to have something that indicates the current period. So I'm going to build a reference line. This is going to be simple. I'm just going to call this reference line. And I'm going to use that whole date truncate thing one more time. And I'm just going to date truncate just to look at the quarter of basically the parameter. So let's select quarter. And this is just basically going to be a visual indication of what period the user has selected. So to do this, I'm going to put this on the circle. Take reference line and put it right here. And now I believe I need to change this again to quarter here. And now down here I can build a reference line. I'm going to put this on the entire table. I'm going to say select quarter parameter. No tooltips, no nothing. I'm going to make this a dotted line. I'm going to make this black. So now I've got a nice visual of where I am from that quarter, from the selection. So as the user keeps moving around, I can clearly see, kind of where they're at. Something like that, just kind of help them visually. And now, if you will, I'm now going to kind of use that field that I created to really show visually exactly what I want to show. I'm going to drop significant change on color, and I'm going to drop it on size. And now we're starting to come together. Wow. I'm going to turn normal into gray, have it blend in with the line. I'm going to turn significant into red. I'm going to go back to size, and I'm going to make it fit just a little bit better. Now you're starting to see visually kind of what I was going for. Now we've got all three pieces of the puzzle. Let's build a dashboard. I got 5 minutes. Let's see if we pull this off. All right. Israel's floating. There's nothing wrong with floating. I encourage people to use floating. I'm sorry, Israel's tile. There's nothing wrong with tile. I use tile, but I'm actually more of a fixed guy. I like just plotting things as far as coordinates are concerned. He's right. There are 100 use cases where I can't use floating. I have to do tiles. I can't even tell you, honestly, which one to use. I'm just going to tell you that there are pros and cons to both. Kind of use them at your own discretion, choose wisely. When I build dashboards, the first thing I do, this is like a report that I always say is going to be in front of a senior exec. I've got to build this in a way that not only does it look pretty, but it kind of fits into the overall branding of everything else. We built a Snowflake dashboard. You know what I would do for Snowflake? I use this. I'm going right to their website, and I'm taking their website as inspiration. First thing I do is I grab their logo. That's what I'm going to do, kind of like what Israel did. So I'm just going to take, I've actually already downloaded a copy of that logo. I'm just going to drag image out here. I'm going to find a copy of that logo. And you'll see kind of as we go forward, all right? I'm going to say, don't fit the image, just make it center. And you know what? Why not? And if they click on it, it takes them to snowflake.com. All right. This is what I mean by, when you start using, if you're going to go floating, you've got to be consistent when it comes to uniformity. I'm literally going to plot things on the X and Y axis, and I'm going to sit there and visually kind of spotball it, kind of by eye at first. But then once I commit to something, if I say this is exactly where I want my logo to be, right there, then everything now is going to be kind of strategically placed around it. I started with that, now I'm going to kind of build a header around it. So the first thing I do is I grab a horizontal, but I'm going to put it out here, and for now, I'll just kind of give it any old background color. I'll just make it this. But again, like I said, the whole point is that uniformity. I'm going to put it on the 0 axis. I'm going to bring this up to about, I'm going to say, about 90. Start there. This dashboard is 1,000 pixels by 800 pixels. I know that because that's kind of what we started with. So since it's 1,000 pixels, I'm going to make the width 1,000 pixels. And I'm going to make the height 2 pixels. So again, like I said, and I'm going to take this a step further. Remember I said using that consistency and that branding? I got a line, but you know what? I want to make everything just like it is here. This is like a sidebar. I'm going to teach you some tricks and stuff that I use. We all do this, and we all do this with our work computers, so you're probably going to be limited to what's on your computer. I'm not going to tell you to download some app or go to this website that'll probably be blocked by your company or something like that. If you're using a PC, the two things I'm about to show you, every PC comes pre-installed with them. If you're lucky enough to have Snagit or some kind of screen capture tool, use that. If you don't have anything, trust me, you have Windows, and Windows has snipping tools. So it comes default. I don't even have Snagit on my personal computer, so snipping tool, I just use this for screen capture. Why am I doing screen capture? I like that blue. I'm going to actually take a screenshot of this whole section down here. And now that I've got this, I'm going to say edit, I'm going to say copy, and I'm going to open Microsoft Paint. Yes, Microsoft Paint. Something you probably will never use in your lifetime, but sometimes these things come in handy. Now I'll close out of that snipping tool. I got Microsoft Paint open. Why do I got Microsoft Paint open? Because Microsoft Paint has a eyedropper, a color picker tool, and it can isolate exactly what that color is, and I can use that in Tableau. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go right here to the color picker tool. If you notice how color 1 seems like it's black and color 2 seems like it's white, I'm just going to click somewhere here in the blue. Color 1 is now blue. Edit colors. I've got a nice RGB code here. This is going to look familiar because let's go back to Tableau. I'm going to go to my line, I'm going to go to background, I'm going to go to more colors, and that looks very familiar. 41, 181, 232. Put that in here, and just like that, I've now got Snowflake Blue. I do this all the time, and again, it just helps with that consistency. I'm going to do this again. I'm going to create a footer. So basically, same principle as before. I've already isolated Snowflake Blue, so it's kind of already there. And now, again, I'm just going to kind of coordinate, basically where I want to put a footer. And again, some of this I've kind of done in advance, looking at the dashboard and the size and making sure exactly as far as the coordinates are concerned. Because Israel's right, if you do this, you kind of got to be consistent. You can't just be throwing things anywhere. So now I've got myself a nice template, just built that from scratch. From here, it's just as easy as it looks. I drag order performance, I drag order percentage, and I'll drag sheet 3, and I just didn't have time to name this. And I'll get strategic about where I put stuff. You know what? Let's put our selection thing up here above our header. Let's take this and throw that over there. And I would, take the time to kind of put these things exactly where I want them. I don't need that. And I'll take this and I'll put this here. Now, same thing as before. If you're good to use floating, be consistent and line things up. I'm with a high title. I'm going to take my first dashboard and I'm going to say 5 for the X. I'm going to say 170 for the Y. I'm going to make it 515 pixels wide, and I'm going to make it 550 pixels high. All right, now I've got that. I'm going to basically, number one, make this fit the entire view. Number two, I'm going to hide these labels. I'll bring them back with a floating box later if I want to. I'm going to hide this title, I'm going to hide these labels, and I'm going to place this box right around, let's say, 532. Again, the last box was at 170 for the Y. This box is going to be at 170 for the Y. The height before was around 550. It's going to be 550 again. And then on the width, I'm going to make this 173. And clearly I've got a problem because you know what? If these things are lined up perfectly against each other, I don't need to show the region name and the region header anymore. I can now just kind of hide them because they're now going to fit. Remember, these boxes are sized to be exactly the same size. So they're going to line up exactly where they're supposed to. It's kind of like I said, that's why it's important to make sure that you're willing to take the time with those coordinates, same as before. If I line these things up perfectly, there's no reason to show the region name and the header on the spark lines. And on this one, looks like we'll make this guy 79. This guy, again, 170 was consistent. This guy's going to be a little bit shorter, and you'll see why in a second. And I'll make him 501, and for width, we'll make it about 286. All right. So now we've got that, and basically, I don't need this because it really doesn't help articulate the view. All right, so we've got something now, and it's starting to look pretty good. And I'm not going to go into the details of finishing it up, but you know, if you took the time, you know, just to kind of clean it up, you'd have something that looks like this. It's really not that much of a difference, you know. Hopefully, I tried to not go too fast, but still go fast. I don't want to keep people here super late. But I know that might have been a lot to digest. But I just want to show you, in 15 minutes, you can do something like this. It's not that hard. I didn't spend a month or a week working on this. This really was just kind of, like I said, you know, I got my coordinates. You know, once you kind of start to commit to a design, just, you know, if you're going to go floating, that to me is the number one thing. You've got to commit to that uniformity. I build dashboards that look like they're tiled. You know, I try to create the illusion so that you can't tell. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with going with the tile format. Works perfectly. It's just kind of a different, to me, sometimes it's a preference, sometimes you may not have a choice. But the beauty of a dashboard like this is that it, at least to me, it does what it's supposed to do. Visually, you can just look at this and see what you would be concerned about. You don't even have to work for this company. It's kind of like, you know, and that's kind of the goal, in my opinion, with all of these kind of business intelligence in general. You want to be able to build these things so that you don't have to have an explanation. I hate when I have to hover over here and you'll get the explanation of what the dashboard does and why it does it. I like building stuff like this. I hand this to anybody and they'll immediately start asking about Vietnam in 1994 and why is there a red dot there? You know. So, I know there's a lot to digest, guys. Does anyone have any questions? Anything that went over too fast? Anybody want me to, I don't know.
Do you have your filter and parameter tied to all three?
And the irony is that, remember, that's a good question. There is no filter. That's not, remember, it's a glorified trick. At the end of the day, every worksheet is using a calculated field, which is only bringing in basically what's selected in the parameter. This is kind of why I had to do that. You know, if I had used a filter, I'd have been in the problem of how do I filter yet still keep 2 quarters at a time when they're only looking at 1 quarter. Right. So like I said, the whole idea of this was to be able to use the calculated field, so there was no filters. You know, as they interact with that parameter right there. Now, mind you, yeah, if I wanted to with these actually I think are connected via the the actual filter pane. But as far as the parameter is concerned, yeah, that was just being done off the calculated field.
And I want to just emphasize how important that was, because sometimes if you just want to do quarter over quarter, it's that table calculation that is done for you. But when you want to do this interactive dashboard, as small of a trick that seems, it's from all the data you create 2 parameters that are, one says this quarter, prior quarter. So you create 2 calculations that are dynamic. But that's feel like a small step, but it's huge in the design of the dashboard.
Yeah, this would have been really tough to do.
Without that.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna say it's not possible, but it would have been tough.
Another important part to understand, it simplified a lot of the design, but to do this with dynamic data, like if you still have data coming in, where, how do you deal with a new quarter?
Well, I mean, that's a good point.
There's no filters here, so.
Dynamic
But you-
parameters are coming, right?
Dynamic
Yeah.
parameters, the
We're not
future
there-
release.
Yeah, we're not all, I mean, that's the thing. Granted, this was 2019.1 or whatever, you know, whatever the most current version is. But I'll be honest with you, most of what you see here, you could have done with 10.4. I didn't really use any new functionality and pull this one off. But yeah, to your point,
Go ahead and explain what we mean dynamic parameters for those who might not know.
for those who don't understand what we mean by dynamic parameters, basically with Tableau, you'll notice when I created this parameter, I basically went up to any kind of date. I chose order date, and I just said, you know, basically create a parameter from the order date. That's what it did. Now the problem is it's going to pull in every single date that's in the order date field now. But tomorrow, there's a new order date. This parameter never gets updated again. You do this once, it's committed. It's like there'll be 77 options here. That's all there will ever be, is 77. When there's 78 tomorrow in the real underlying data, there's still only 77 in the user parameter. Dynamic
Unless someone
parameters
goes in and.
yeah, unless you basically rebuild this again. The concept of dynamic parameters is the idea that when we refresh our data and we now have 831 data, 831-2019, 831-2019 hasn't happened yet, but it will in a few weeks. So when we finally have that, you want that parameter, you want that drop down that a user selects, you want that to be in there. You want that latest time frame to be something that's now in there that they can use. Filters work that way, but parameters don't. But dynamic parameters are coming. Now the sad truth is they're coming, but with all of us at your company, I don't know. Companies take a little bit longer to upgrade as far as, you know, getting to the most current version.
There is an extension that lets you do dynamic parameters now, but it's unlikely that your company will let you
Yes.
do it.
To be honest with you, I've worked for companies, I don't think I've ever had a company that let me use any extensions. But yes, if your company lets you use extensions or you're not locked into those types of restrictions, there's a lot of different extensions out there that do a lot of great things. If you can use them, I would say explore them just in general, see what they do, you know? Hell, I'd love to use something, to tell you the truth, it'd be nice.
You
That's
could
good.
also probably use a date parameter, right? Like just the calendar looking one, which isn't going to be as beautiful as this, but it would include all dates.
You could, yes.
So
But
it
it
filters
trick.
down to just-
Yeah, this goes back to the parameter was, yeah, you could. I don't want to say you can because you're right. And the more I think about it, you could. I have to change how I did this, but you could. Because there still are other ways to do the quarter over quarter comparison. Sometimes they just need to get more complex. You could have some level of detail, you could have some more sophisticated table calculations. There are 100 different ways to do this, and none of them are the right way. You just got to pick whichever one works best for you. I would never tell you that you have to do anything the way we do it because I've seen alternatives to things I've done. I'm like, man, I would have done it that way if I'd known. So I always encourage that. Don't ever feel like there's a one-size-fits-all approach for any of this stuff. You know, whatever you're willing to explore, hell, teach us. Matter of fact, if you learn something that we haven't learned how to do, come up here and give a presentation. Because some of us would actually like that. You know. Good point.
Thank you, Rashid.
All right.
Earlier this evening, had a lot of people come in, so welcome everybody else who we haven't met yet. Make sure that I know that you're here. I recognize a few faces. Make sure that I get you registered before you leave, or just drop me an email if you can. Just let me know that you were here. Thank you, sir. So also, Jose had some good ideas for future presentations. Rashid mentioned presentations. If there's ever anything you'd like to learn about. And we have Bethany Patterson here with us when we do the meeting down in South Charlotte sometimes, and that's more just kind of open questions. So we usually have specific presentations here, but if you've just got open questions, bring those out here. If you send us something in advance, we can try to make a presentation around it.